The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
Short Time Wrestling Podcast, back home here in wonderful New Brighton, Minnesota. Jason Bryant here with you. And, of course, you know we're in New Brighton because you get my weather tweets every day at 9:30. Bright and sunny today. We are talking about a topic that is actually very important for the world of wrestling. If you're a wrestling coach, if you're somebody who has a side hustle, whether it be a T-shirt business or you run camps and clinics, we're Jarrett Yehlen from Northwestern Mutual here in Minneapolis. Not just a guy that's off the street. Jarrett and I go way back, like 20-something years. One of the 3 or 4 Minnesota residents now that are graduates of Pocosin High School. Dude, we went to high school together. What
Crazy.
The heck? Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. I mean, we reconnected a couple years ago. Jarrett does some financial planning for me. He also has some clients in the wrestling world that, obviously for privacy issues, we're not going to take it who, but let's just say there are large wrestling programs in this state, and you can probably put 2 and 2 together on which schools he may or may not have had or currently has clients with. Jarrett, before we even get started about the topic today, financial planning, especially for people that have side hustles, independent media professionals like, I don't know, yours truly. What is your background in wrestling? Is there any background at all?
I have zero background in wrestling.
With the exception of?
With the exception of being a proud alumni of Pocosin High School, one of the top wrestling programs in the state of Virginia. Always enjoyed going to the matches, always enjoyed watching, always enjoyed supporting, and they were our flagship program before, as you know, football took off, baseball took off. I'd like to think that soccer was right up there as well.
Yeah, there were some state tournament games. Jarrett was a soccer player. He was a year behind me, and I was the PA announcer for soccer. So I got to say, Jarrett, actually one time, I think the only time outside of starting, we were just talking before we started, the goalies really don't get talked about a whole lot. And when Jarrett was JV, he did score a goal in a game, I remember. It was
That's correct.
It lit up some team. It was like 14-0. And it's like, wait, the goalkeeper just scored. I mean, granted, you moved up and came up, and, I don't know if it was a header or something. I just remember you scored. I'm like, dude, this team sucks we're playing. I don't know. It was definitely not a district opponent, but the joke was the only time you hear about goalkeepers is when they do something bad. So,
correct.
Kind of like usually the heavyweight. You don't hear about the heavyweight until they screw up and lose the match for you in the last weight of the tournament or something like that.
I had my moments in the sun, junior year, senior year, when we were winning district titles and regional titles, but once we got to state tournament,
I still cannot stand York High School soccer.
Yeah, we got.
I'm sorry, Tommy
we got handed
Hippel.
it pretty well.
I'm sorry, Tommy Hippel. Still not a fan. Paul Sadu, still not a fan. Sorry, brother.
I got a bunch of guys that I played club soccer with who went to either York or Tab or Grafton towards the end of our relationship, and we still poke each other every now and then on Facebook, so it's all in good-natured fun.
People still use the poke feature.
No.
Oh, I know. I was just going there because it's funny because Facebook poke. It actually is still a thing. So the sports culture at Pocosin, small AA high school, then AA. Now we're class 2 because there's 5,000 classes in the state of Virginia. Being an athlete, so you've had a mindset about how athletes train, the success, the team sport aspect, the individual sport aspect, because you were also a swimmer. So you know the team sport, the individual sport, you respect the sport of wrestling, because you have a tie to the University of Minnesota. Won't necessarily get into exactly what that is, again, privacy issues, but you've been around athletes, and you know that a lot of these sports, it's a labor of love, and it's usually not a labor of money that's coming their way.
True story. Very true story. We find a lot of people end up working in sports because it's a passion of theirs. They're not necessarily chasing a dollar. Once you get into some of the professional athletes and of that caliber, they're trying to still play just to make the money. But for the most part, we find that 99% of people who do work in sports, they're doing it because they have a passion for it.
Now, we look at the passion here. You've got a passion for doing this, and it's not necessarily a job. This isn't a job. It is a profession, but it's something because you're an athlete. You care about sports. You care about the people in sports. And it's more than just like, yeah, I'm getting a commission or I'm making money off this. You're helping people prepare for their futures and save for their futures.
That's correct. What's interesting is I didn't take a class in college that said, here's how you become a financial advisor. Or I didn't take any sort of route that said, I want to become a financial advisor. It was more around, I didn't necessarily even love money, to be quite frank. Or love.
I don't. That's why I work at wrestling.
Well, I didn't have that affinity that I want to go out and make a ton of money after college. In fact, I wanted to play soccer, but I wasn't good enough to play in the Premier League or Major League Soccer. And so I got to figure out something else to do. So I ended up working in sports first. But what led me to the financial topics were I took a class in college that was a personal and family finance course. It was an elective. And it was towards the end of my time there, and I was just looking to kind of get out.
University of Missouri? When you were
University of Missouri, yes. Interestingly enough, we had
there to be a J school student, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah, I wanted to be in
journalism.
broadcast journalism, right, as everybody did. And next thing I know, I'm sitting in this personal family finance course, and the professor said, "How many of you are in here because it's an elective?" Nearly half the class put their hands up. And then he goes, "Great. How many of you actually really enjoy math?" Nobody put their hands up. So I knew I was in the right place. Now, what he did after that was mind-blowing. He passed out financial calculators to everybody. I'd never seen one of these things before. Had letters all over it. It had different equations that I'd never really seen before.
Yeah, this isn't your TI-82 in like Miss Freeman's class with...
No, absolutely not. No, we're not playing like Tetris that's saved on this calculator. Yeah. We're not doing that.
You got your link?
I don't have it. I don't have it anymore. But anyhow, he passes out these calculators and he goes, "Okay, type in a present value of 0. Type in, type in $500 a month. And, we're going to max out something. Type in $500 a month. Type in 40 years. Let's say we get an interest rate of 7.5%, somewhere in that ballpark, and then solve for future value." Jason, the answer was like $1 million+. At that point, that was math that I could get on board with.
Yeah.
Knowing that the time value of money was in my favor because I was only 23 years old.
Right.
And knowing that working in sports, I wasn't going to make a tremendous amount of money, especially right out of the gates. I knew that I had to find an employer with a good 401k program or some sort of retirement program. But I also knew the power of compounding interest and how I wanted to start saving for long term. And that the money actually made more money itself versus me going out and actually doing anything. So that was math that I could get on board with.
So, and when you're working in college sports, you work for a Division III school here locally, and you've got some experience with that large school here in the Twin Cities. And at what point did you realize that, you know what, I'm getting into this field, but I really think there are people in college sports, because a lot of the clients out of your office and your peers are professional athletes in the area. They're college administrators, they're ADs, they're coaches from all the various colleges in this state. So there's a big athletics portfolios type of, I guess, for lack of a better word, that you oversee. And why do they tie so closely together for you?
Again, it comes back to my passion for sports. I worked in college sports for nearly 10 years. I loved it. Loved it to death. Loved being in the environment. I loved being in the conversation. I loved interacting with coaches. I loved solving problems. I did a lot of facility management and capital planning management. But I knew it wasn't the end all be all for me. I wanted to impact people on a greater scale, and, deciding what type of video game system or TV system was going to get installed in a locker room, it didn't really do it for me anymore. Right. So I wanted to have a greater impact on the people themselves, because that's what I really enjoyed about sports is the personalities. Mm-hmm. We're all there because we love the same thing and we all want to win. But I wasn't having the impact on them personally that I really wanted to. I didn't have impact on the wins or losses because I wasn't a coach, but I did support them in their mission. So how could I do something independently of that to support them? Well, long story short, I'd always been interested in being a financial advisor. And then, 5+ years ago, made the decision, let's get out, let's start our own practice. Let's market ourselves to these people in college sports or professional sports or front offices or coaches or independent contractors or anybody that has a love of sports and they need somebody to fight for them and take them off the treadmill of life for an hour every 6 months just to sit down and look at their program and make sure that they still have an eye on the prize 20, 30, 40 years down the road. That was something that I could really get on board with. And we've enjoyed it. We do planning for almost 500 clients. And I would say nearly 75% of them are all in college sports or professional sports or some sort of sporting organization. And we're licensed in 31 different states. So it's not just a local firm here, it's a regional and national firm as well. And the power of technology allows us to do that.
Yeah, so even before we get into some of the scenarios that we've mapped out and some of the questions that we've taken on social media, real quick, if people have questions, I mean, how accessible are you if you can answer the question directly, or if you can refer them to and this isn't necessarily a plug for Northwestern Mutual, this is because Jarrett's a friend of mine, and he's got some knowledge that I felt, and my wife actually had the idea of putting this out there, something that could help wrestling coaches, because a lot of us have side hustle. There's wrestling media out there that we're independent. There's coaches that are running clubs or just starting clubs or thinking about starting a club, or you're a volunteer assistant somewhere, Division I, Division II, Division III. So there's people and resources that you're connected to, nationwide. But if they want to buzz you real quick, I mean, how do they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So, I mean, you can do a lot of different things. So Jarrett Yehlen, at Northwestern Mutual, right? You actually have to spell it out, right? It's not a common name. It's first name dot last name at nm, as in northwesternmutual.com, JARRETT.YEHLEN at nm.com. And then, I respond to anything. I mean, cell phone, text message, 612-209-4523. Smoke signals and carrier pigeons, they might not get to me, but again, if you get in touch with me, you know how to.
The Ojibwe live up there near Mille Lacs, so I mean that's still a thing.
Yes, smoke signals are still a thing.
We have native land here,
but cell phone, email, we're well versed in technology. Right. I've got a great team behind us, and again, I would say out of all of our meetings, we hold somewhere in the ballpark of 60 meetings a month. Mm-hmm. I would say probably 2/3 of them, 40 of them, are not face to face. It's over the phone. It's the power of technology. Even locally, sometimes people don't want to get from one side of the Twin Cities to the other.
It can kind of suck, especially with 35W under construction on weekends.
Especially during the wintertime.
Oh, yeah. Well,
we don't want to leave our house, right?
Smoke signals and dog sleds.
So how do we get everything done in the wintertime? We do it via GoToMeeting. We do it via telephone. I mean, fortunately, the power of technology exists. And my job is to understand your story. It's not just, hey, let's open this account, or, hey, let's start this for you. It's more so, hey, help me understand where you want to go.
Yeah, this is not a stock, it's not there may be some variances, but it's not a stock solution for everybody.
No, absolutely not. It is, help me understand the story, help me get to know you. I mean, it sounds a bit canned, but what are your goals and objectives? What are they really? I mean,
we're talking about this when we first, jumped into it, and I was like, well, I don't even know. I'm a guy who gets paid by like 30 to 40 1099s each year, to make my living.
So what happened? We started to peel back the layers of the onion, and we started to find out, well, I want to grow this thing bigger. I do want to retire one day.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of other things to the story, right? But it's my job to know the story.
Like
really,
marry
really well.
Up, like I did. No.
I think if we can all do that, we're just fine, right?
Yeah. That's the financial planning 101. Find wife with good job. Check. Well, I checked that box a while ago. Now, let's get into some of these scenarios. The first thing I want to do is I want to address some of these questions, and that we are going to have Lindsay Beasley, a certified public accountant and wife of George Mason head wrestling coach Frank Beasley, on later to talk about the tax-related questions. So things like when someone sets up an LLC, then what? Converting club to state-level nonprofit. A lot of 501c3 questions with Lindsay. We'll take care of that. Write-offs and things. But just surface-level tax stuff. What's something that everybody should remember going into a financial planning type of situation?
Oh, boy. I think what a lot of people have to remember is, yes, Uncle Sam is going to get their fair share, whether it's now or later. And a lot of times that can drive where you're saving for retirement or how you're saving for yourself today.
Yeah, it's like you were telling me that at some situations, in this particular plan, you're going to pay taxes coming and going. Like you're paying taxes going in, you're paying taxes when you pull it out, things of that nature. And that's one of the things that, if there's 3-4 plans, I mean, there's a lot of them out there. Like, for example, okay, there's this, and this. Here's why this is good for you, pre-tax, post-tax, a lot of vernacular. And how versed do you have to be in the tax structures to be able to present this information to people adequately?
We know surface level stuff. So again, I'm not a CPA, right? But, we're actually going through some certified financial planner certification right now. And, in there we have, employer benefits planning. We have retirement planning. We have investment planning. We have tax planning, estate planning. So if you think about the breadth of knowledge that we have to have on our end, it's pretty wide. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like 12 miles wide. In some areas, it's 3 feet deep. Other areas, it's 100 feet deep, right? So my job is to know the entire breadth of it, wrap my arms around all the information, and help you make sense of it.
All right, let's go through some scenarios here that people in the sport of wrestling will encounter. And you have experience with a lot of these scenarios based on your interaction with coaches when they're first starting their career, life-changing situations like getting married, how that affects your saving. In some cases where if you've got a Roth IRA and then all of a sudden you guys start making, there's too much money, for certain plans that you're on. So let's go scenario one. We'll start all of these as single guy out of college.
Okay.
Okay. So before we add the married component.
So mac and cheese and Diet Coke, ramen noodles.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe you might be living in a house Jay Robinson owns or something like that. So, Minnesota joke. Scenario one, say, right out of college, volunteer assistant coach. You're not officially paid by the university. And of course, with your background in college athletics, you know the situation, and your money's made by, the wrestling club. You're maybe an athlete with USA Wrestling trying to win money at tournaments, and you're working camps and clinics in the summertime. Base level stuff. When should they start saving, and how much can they conceivably save to make it actually worthwhile?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say start saving as soon as possible, right? And it sounds like this person, we're just trying to keep our head above water, right? Like the water line is like right above our nose.
Their biggest, decision is, do I throw in on this Xbox One or this PS4? So it's similar to what you're dealing with, but
yeah, of course.
They're probably still living with roommates who are undergrads, something like that.
Of course. It starts with a monthly budget. It has to, right? You have to know what's coming in and you have to know what's going out. Any good business knows that. Any good saver knows that. Whatever is coming in, whatever is going out cannot exceed that. And if it is, you're doing something wrong. So let's start with a budget, right? Let's just take stock of everything that we have going on
and be honest with it, because I was one of these people. I'm terrible at outlining budgets. Like, oh yeah, I only spend this. If you're going to the bar 3 nights a week, man up. You got to put that in your budget. You got to know that's what you're spending. I mean, you probably should be cutting that out to maybe 1 day a week. But as an example, college, you don't have any. You're done competing or something like that. So be aware of where you're spending it. Don't lie to yourself when creating a budget.
Correct. Exactly. Take stock of everything, right? Because then you actually can make some honest decisions out of that. For this person, it doesn't sound like they have much of a retirement plan either. I would tell you the 20-60-20 rule is a very, very good one to follow.
And explain what the 20-60-20 is.
20-60-20 is what you're looking at 20% right now is savings. How do I set that aside for savings? I have to save that, whether it's in my short-term emergency account, whether it's in some sort of long-term account that I've started and I've done a little bit of homework and I've started a Roth IRA or something else, or maybe it's a medium-term account somewhere in that world, right? How do I determine that amount? And then you've got 20% for discretionary expenses. Discretionary expenses are like going to the bar 3 nights a week, right? Or movies or travel.
That may or may not
hobbies.
Be based on personal experience.
Yeah. And then 60% of it, those are your fixed non-discretionary expenses. Mm-hmm. Rent, cell phone, utilities, car, right? Like you have to have a car. If that's part of your fixed non-discretionary, then included in that 60%. Student loan, debt repayment, like things that are reoccurring every single month.
Student loan payments kick in pretty close after graduation.
6 months.
Yeah.
6 months, right?
Hello, unemployed student loan debt that we're hearing about these days.
Yes. So you need to get a handle on your budget really, really quickly.
Before we get to scenario 2, let's dial that back. So say you're listening to this right now. You want to be a coach. You're a college student. You're probably not going to try to go for the ladder, the Olympic ladder. You want to get into coaching. You might end up in Bismarck at the University of Mary. You might end up in St. Cloud at St. Cloud State. You might start in Chanute, Kansas at Neosho Junior College for all we know. Is there a class that what should they do while they're in college? Like find a class, find that elective. What can they do to just even prepare themselves before they go in with the meeting with somebody like you?
Well, a class in college is awesome, right? I mean, if you have the availability, if there are electives that are, personal finance or something like that, absolutely take it. It's going to serve you for the remainder of your life. Like there's no class in college that tells you what health insurance to elect. There's no class in college that says, here's how you get the right mortgage. There's no class in college that says all of that. In fact, the required course at University of Missouri when I was coming in was a library research course.
What's a library?
Well, remember the big card catalog systems?
Oh, yes, the Dewey Decimal System.
System.
I'm joking because I lived across from the library at Old Dominion and actually only was ever stepped foot in it like 3 times.
So our first class, every freshman had to take it, was the library research class. It was a 1-credit class. You had to go over to Ellis Library and you had to figure out what the heck you were doing, right? There's no class like that in college. So if you have something available to you, take it. I'm a big proponent of reading as well. There's some good stuff that's out there. I mean, you can just Google personal finance and you'll get
Is there a
15
personal
different
finance
books.
for dummies out there? I mean,
There is.
Seems like that would be logical.
There is, absolutely. And then when it comes to choosing a financial advisor, I would interview some. Whether it's me or anybody else or 5 or 6 or other 7 different people, I would interview them. Come up with the right fit, come up with the right philosophy, because you want to make sure that you have that person's respect and they have yours as well.
Let's move to scenario 2. Now, I'm going to ask what the differences are, because we've got the college kid fresh out, volunteer, maybe even finishing up his degree. A scenario 2, the paid assistant. This guy's been on staff. He's part of the university budget. They're tied to the university. They're also working side camp, side hustle. The key is now, where is the difference between saving for that side money and then what's being already taken out tax deduction wise from your university paycheck? You get that check and it's got taxes taken out. So how are you deciding how and where to save? I mean, would you say, okay, well, all my camp money is going to go into this account, or should it be distributed evenly between how are you saving?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, this kind of led us down the path of being a financial advisor for folks in college sports, because most individuals, they're looking for their first job wherever they get, right? Whether they go to University of Mary or Oklahoma State or Northern Iowa or Lehigh. It doesn't matter where they're
I like
going.
how you just named schools that had wrestling right off the bat.
Well, right. I mean, I'm looking at a Matt Talk Online t-shirt, right? I mean,
I better talk wrestling.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But hopefully that proves, hey, listen, we are well versed in the college landscape. Like, we know what the heck we're talking about here. We find that most individuals, when they get to those college campuses, they meet with whoever is the HR person. They're given a packet, and then they're told, hey, go across campus and get your student ID, and then off you go. Like, they're not told how to go through the packet, how to go through their employee benefits, what's available to them, where can they save. They're not told those things. And to be quite frank, the HR professional on campus, they're not licensed to give that advice. And so they don't want to give any advice because they don't want the college or university to be held liable, right? So that's why people like me are sought out. But take a stock for what benefits are offered, whether it is a 401A or a 403B or a Section 457.
I had a 403B when I worked for the NWCA and USA Wrestling, because those are nonprofits.
Correct. Most nonprofits or government entities or higher education are going to have a 403B. Some might offer an optional Section 457 or a 401A, but again, they're all tax-deferred savings vehicles, meaning you're putting money away out of your salary. Like, that percentage is just coming right off the top. And then you have to pay tax on it later when you withdraw the money 20, 30, 40 years down the road from now, once you hit 59 and a half. So take a stock for what the benefits are first, right? Elect your basic health insurance unless you're still actually on your parents' insurance, which
is 26?
26 years old, right? So either or. If your parents have a great, insurance program, just stay on theirs. But me, I mean, my dad was in the military, so we had great insurance. I stayed on it until I was 26, and then I had to elect my own. Just choose the basic option if you're a pretty healthy person, but then understand, what is the employer-placed retirement plan? What are they matching? For every dollar that I put in, what are they putting in? Understand that and do up to the maximum amount that they give you. Now, you can put in $18,000, $500 annually if you really want to. I wouldn't recommend it if you were a paid first assistant.
Yeah, you're making $24,000 a year.
$24,000, $31,000 a year, like, depending where you are. Like, don't put away 70% of your income. Don't do that. But do understand, what is my employer giving me for every percentage that I actually put in? And then adjust your budget accordingly. Again, back to the budget. Now that you've elected health insurance, now that you've elected a couple of withholdings from a tax perspective, now that you've elected your retirement benefit, now understand, what am I actually seeing on a biweekly, monthly, or semi-monthly basis from an income perspective.
So let's also look at it this way. I remember when I got a job, when I left and went to USA Wrestling, and, for me, in my mentality, it was a pay cut from what I was getting at when we were here for Wrestling 411, but it wasn't, because while the take home was bigger, at where I was at, I had full benefits at USA Wrestling. I had a retirement plan. So all those things factor in. So when you're considering a job, it is important to consider what you get on the back end. So if the difference is $5,000 up front, but they have better benefits, how do you have to measure the difference there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some people like saving on their own outside, right? Whether it's using their employer plan or outside the employer plan. You have to understand what other options that the employer plan has as well. because inside of that workplace retirement plan, you're going to have different funds that are available. Most of them are target date funds. The Department of Labor came out and said an employer needs to be a good steward of their employees' money. And before, they just used to put their match directly into a money market fund, which is basically earning nothing right now. Instead, the employer has to be a good steward, and these target date funds came out, which means, okay, Jason is, Jason, the new assistant, is 25 years old. We're going to give him a target date fund with a maturity 35 years out from now. So we're actually doing the right thing there. And so I know I'm bouncing around the question a little bit here, but for the most part, you want to understand really deeper into what are those employer retirement benefits before you decide, hey, I'm going to go actually do something else.
Here's something that's going to affect all these scenarios that we're going through. Wrestling is a very transient type of sport, much like, military bounces from place to place. Well, wrestling coaches' longevity, it might take you 4 or 5 assistant spots before you land in a place for 10, 15 years, So why is it important for coaches and people getting into this that are on their own to set something up that's independent of their employer as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of the employer place retirement plans, that's your money. I mean, it exists electronically somewhere and it exists on paper somewhere. And it's just kind of, some people look at it, they're like, well, this isn't even real money because I've never even seen this, right? It just exists on a statement somewhere.
Yeah, so like when somebody retires, let's use Sammy Henson as an example, as a joke, because he's been like 15 places. He might have retirement funds in 15 different accounts. So, you got to think about that too.
Yeah.
No offense, Sammy.
You can take those dollars with you wherever you go, whether they're held at TIA CREF, which is it's a big higher education institutional investor. Stands for the Teachers Investment and Annuity Association and College Retirement Educators Fund. They exist on higher education campuses. And so a lot of campuses nationwide use TIA CREF as their third-party custodian for retirement plans. There's Fidelity, there's Vanguard, there's John Hancock, there is T. Rowe Price, Franklin Templeton. I mean, investment company du jour might have the benefits at your workplace.
And they're usually the commercials you paying no attention to at like the NFL playoffs or something. They advertise heavily during sporting events, and how many people actually pay attention to them until it's too late?
The only thing I pay attention to is when the NCAA championships are on, whether it's Division 1, 2, 3 in wrestling or March Madness or the bowl season. Northwestern Mutual is a corporate partner of the NCAA, right? So it makes a lot of sense for me to work with college coaches because, I mean, the commercials are plastered in their face, right? But to your point of if you've been 15 different places like Sammy, right? Or if you've been
asterisk, 7, I can't confirm he's been to 15, but it's up there. It's that's kind of the running joke.
Or if you've been 3 places, it doesn't matter. Those dollars that exist out there electronically, they are your money, and you can take them wherever you go. Now, to your point, it is important to have something set up independently as a holding ground or as a parking lot or a warehouse, whatever adjective that you want to use to describe this account, so you can move that money out of your employer's old plan and into a IRA for yourself. That way, you have a lot of different options. You have 4 options when you leave an employer. You can cash the money out. Don't do that, because then you pay a 10% early penalty. Plus, you're typically receiving it as taxable income that year. Mm-hmm. You can just leave it where it is. It's just going to float along like a bobber in the ocean wherever it is, and typically you can't make changes to that account. The third is you can roll it into your new employer's retirement plan, which that employer's plan is happy to receive those dollars, right? Or you can move it into your own private IRA. That way, the investment world becomes your playground. You have options to thousands and thousands of different funds with different strategies, whereas an employer place plan might have 10, 20, maybe 30 plans if you're lucky, or fund choices that you can choose from. And so you're really limited in what you can actually do and how to design your portfolio inside of it. I always recommend, from a benefits perspective, once you leave said employer, if the balance is big enough, let's roll it into an IRA. And that's just investment stuff. From an insurance planning perspective, especially if you are a new assistant coach and you're in your late 20s, early 30s, somewhere in that world, and you're starting to think about this other insurance planning stuff too, yes, your employer will offer you some benefits life insurance, long-term disability insurance. But when you leave, typically you can't take it with you. And if you can, it's cost prohibitive to do so. That stuff is based on your age and health. That makes way more sense to do it independently. Then you can take it wherever you go, and you don't have to worry about what does your new employer have from a benefits perspective.
All right, scenario 3 here. This is where we get into a large swath of people who I think this type of discussion is crucial for, and it's educators. Or it's not educators, because we have a lot of high school coaches that aren't even in the school systems anymore. They might be security guards somewhere else, or they're private enterprise and they come in school. But for the teacher and the high school coach who is off during the summer, and they coach in Fargo, they coach wrestling, freestyle and Greco. They're big into that, and they've got a camp system that they're working. So that summer income, they work a lot through the summer, and they make a lot of money out of that for them to supplement their teaching income. Scenarios that would work for that type of individual. And we also might be getting into the married portion of the world now too.
So you're saying they're getting an influx of cash in the summertime working camps, whether it's in Fargo or Harrisburg. In addition to say
if it's $60,000 hypothetically, depending on what state you're in, that's your teaching salary after X amount of years. I'm not sure what it is everywhere. I know that in Virginia, starting out when I was looking at subbing after college, I was like, okay, can I get into this? And I think entry was like $40,000 a year at that point. So we're looking at, obviously a place like Oklahoma, notwithstanding with their problems down there with their system, but say, okay, the key is saving that camp and that club income money, like building that into your salary, or are you treating that differently than what you're getting each week from your teaching job?
We're trying to treat those dollars differently, to be perfectly honest, because it's an influx of cash that's not expected. Whether you're working 15 hours a week at a camp, or whether you pick up another camp in addition, or whatever it is.
And that is taxable. That's something to remember. You don't want to not report that.
That's right.
That's a key thing, because
that's right.
An audit could really screw you there.
That's right. Now, if you're making over a certain amount, then that employer is going to send you, a 1099 at the end of the year, right? So you do have to claim that, and you have to claim that as taxable income. Now, that's why we're treating those dollars differently, because it's different than just your W-2 salaried employee. There are no benefits that are spinning out of it. If you make $10,000 in a summer and you're in the 24% federal tax rate plus state, you're going to pay some tax on those dollars, and so you want to make sure that you're holding some of those out. That's why we're trying to treat those dollars differently, because, well, you still have to pay tax on them. So we're trying to put those into some sort of individual brokerage account, or a joint brokerage account, or even just a money market account somewhere to get it out of the ATM view, right? Like you don't want to go to Super America or Wawa or Quick Trip or whatever the heck it is.
I love the Wawa reference.
Oh, it's great, man. When that place came onto Highway 17, it was a game changer, right?
Game changer.
But you don't want to see it in your ATM view, right? So you want to have those dollars treated differently. Especially from a tax perspective, because you're going to need to have some liquidity available come next April, and you have to pay the piper. Like Uncle Sam wants his. He's going to get his no matter what. So you want to make sure that those dollars are out of your checking account. They're out of your savings account. You can't see them in the ATM view. Put them somewhere else. Joint brokerage account, individual brokerage account, money market fund. Set up a separate savings account at your bank. Do something else. Just get it out of your daily expenditures.
All right, now, let's go. Scenario 4. This is where you can pretty much interchange me here, because I've got my own business. But it's me. It's just me. Wrestling club. I'm not teaching. My whole deal, I've got this wrestling club. I'm not going to use, like Pinnacle, for example. I'm not going to ask, financials. I'm not, where I'm going with that. But say I want to start a Pinnacle, and it's just me, and I've got kids paying X amount to be members. I've got facility space, I've got to rent or build. How am I saving money? It's me. That's all I got.
It starts with a profit loss statement, right? Again, know what's going out, know what's coming in. That's the backbone of your business.
And we'll also get to the, am I an LLC? Am I an S Corp? And all those things. Those are all important too. We'll get that with the CPA side of the questions with Lindsay. But, I'll give you, I guess, pretty much, permission to kind of explain my scenario and how it might help others. Obviously, not going to the financial numbers, but like example.
Of course.
How does somebody like me set this up? How did we set this up?
Yeah. So you're looking at your gross earnings, right? At the end of the year, what am I going to make? Now, I understand that my income is going to fluctuate. Some months are good. Some months are bad. Some months are great. Some months are even better. But at the same time, you want to get a really, really good 12-month picture of what that looks like.
And some months really suck because a lot of the times you should file, you're filing quarterly.
Correct.
Which also is something, again, we'll get to the tax discussion soon. But yeah, that's also something to keep in mind.
Right. So profit loss statement. Understand what's coming in the door. Understand what's going out from an expense perspective. And then you can build your business from that, right? So that would be item number one. And then most business owners that I know, even myself, most business owners that I know are reinvesting as much as they can back into the business. A growing business is probably reinvesting somewhere in the ballpark of 40 to 50% of their gross earnings back into the business.
And in this case, for example, I get a big check comes in from a client. I'm turning around buying a new computer. I'm upgrading my office equipment. I'm, spending money on marketing materials, which are, a lot of these things are you can write off as far as your taxes go. So like, as you look around, I've got a soundboard, I got a mixer, but I'm in need of new equipment. So for example, next year, I'd like to buy a new, production machine. That's what you mean by investing back into the business. Or if you're a wrestling coach, new mats, new, renovating the showers, things of that nature.
Correct. Right. If you've got a brick and mortar building, right, maybe it's the entryway, maybe it's a towel service, maybe it is some sort of cleaning professional service that comes in once a month to sterilize everything, right? I mean, we're talking about fixed expenses that you see in and out the door. From an investment perspective, yes, new mats, maybe it's new lockers, maybe it's some sort of equipment, right? Maybe it's new headgear that's available for checkout and then some sort of sanitation program. Whatever it is, those are expenses that are going to reinvest back into the business, which is ultimately going to keep your customers happy. It's ultimately going to have them, they're going to have a better experience. They're going to come back. They're going to spend more money with you. They're going to refer you to friends, et cetera, et cetera. The business grows from there. Maybe it's marketing, whether it's online or print. Word of mouth is still a pretty damn good marketing tool. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, yes, you do have to. I have a website. I have printed material. Like, we all have that stuff. But a growing business, is probably reinvesting somewhere in the ballpark of 40 to 50%. A sustaining business is probably somewhere around 30 to 35% reinvesting back into the business. So understand your profit and loss statements. Understand what's coming in, understand what's going out, and then you can start to forecast based on participation levels.
Yeah, and then so saving early when you're end of your month, you're like, I have no money in my account until, dues are due.
Yeah, we find that with a lot of small businesses that their best investment is their own business. Like, that's their home run hitter. And I agree, and it should be, right? But you also need to have that number two hitter that can move that guy around the bases when it's not doing so poorly, right? You need to have somebody that can get on base for ones and twos, that sort of thing. So have something small and fixed in the background. It doesn't have to be massive, but even something small and fixed, you're creating the habit for yourself, right? Because if the habit isn't created and you're not saving anything, well, now it's difficult to carve off of the bottom line. But if you've implemented something small, you know this. It's much easier to take a baby step and then another one and then another one and then another one and then another one versus wait 5 to 10 years from now and then take a giant leap forward.
Crawl before you can walk.
Crawl before you can walk.
As we wrap up here, as this guy is a busy guy, we want to go over some of these things that we've talked about. Again, a lot of this stuff's over my head, and it's taken me a couple years to try to understand. But knowing how wrestling people are, because we've got so many scenarios that I've mapped out. These are real scenarios. These are people I just ran into this weekend at the NWCA convention. Every single one of those scenarios rings true. So there is value in saving, even when you feel like you don't have the money to save. And again, what are just some simple things that they can remember? Like, okay, when it's time to go find somebody to help them manage their money and manage their future, and say, all right, in 20 years. What am I going to have to save for myself? Am I going to be able to put a down payment on a house? Am I going to be able to make sure that I can retire earlier than I want to? What are just, I guess, some simple tips when seeking out a financial planner?
Again, make sure your philosophy lines up with them, right? Obviously, I have a bias towards Northwestern Mutual. My business is branded with Northwestern. Now, we do planning specifically for coaches and administrators, but I have good friends at Northwestern that do planning specifically for doctors or specifically for attorneys or architects. Find somebody that understands your niche business really, really well, because it's easier for them to understand the story. It's easier for them to understand what do you actually want to do. And then from there, maybe interview one or two people, right? I mean, it's your money. At the end of the day, it's your money. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable with where it's going. But that person, I view them as a coach, right? I mean, we're going to use a boxing analogy, right? Your financial advisor is like your corner man. We're not actually out in the ring doing the work. It's you. But every 90 seconds, we're the one that you're coming back to and we're saying, listen, you're doing great out there, kid. Rubbing some Vaseline on your eyebrows, right? We're shooting some water in your mouth. Then you're getting right back out there. Then maybe you had a tough round. You're coming back to the corner. We're saying, hey, listen, watch out for the left jab. You know what's coming. You know he's got a killer one. Watch out for it. You know what's coming. We're the ones that are taking you off the treadmill of life 1 hour every 6 months, right? Just to make sure that we're looking at this stuff. We're really living and breathing the plan because it's easy. Life can throw you curveballs, man. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. I've got 3 kids under the age of 7. My life is chaos, but I love it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But I will say this. You want to make sure that you have a cohesive plan and you're on the same page with your financial advisor. Take their phone call when they call you. They're calling you because they care about you. They're not just calling you because it's time to get a review. They are calling because they do have your best interest in mind, right? So answer the phone call and then meet with them. Be honest with them. Tell them where you want to be. Don't let them just push you into some sort of product or some sort of situation or some sort of account. If you're a small business owner, maybe it is a SEP IRA that you need, right? If you are a W-2 employee, maybe it's a Roth IRA that you need, right? If you're getting married or having kids or buying a first home and you got all this other stuff going on, maybe we do need to protect our income and maybe we do need to hedge against risk and get some insurance. Or how do we save for college planning? Like how do we get that 529 going for our kids so they're not strapped with all these student loans?
You've got 3, I've got 2, and that's a very real, it's a reality for us.
It's a real thing, man. I mean, it's basically like, it's like adult daycare is what it really looks like from a cost perspective. But
there's a comic book, comic that ran on Sunday. Yes, we still get the newspaper here. It was, what was it called? Pearls Before Swine, I believe. And it was like, there's a guy in a cap and gown talking about, hey, I remember you when you were a kid. What are you here to say thanks? He goes, no, I'm here to beg. I'm $350,000 in student loan debt. Very real, very real.
It's a real thing, right? And, we look at whether it's kids in daycare or maybe they have a nanny or maybe they have some sort of before or after school care, whatever it is. Well, hopefully that's in your budget. Hopefully that's accounted for. We're getting a little bit aside here. But
right, but these are real things that people deal with being a parent.
Yeah, for sure. If that is accounted for, well, what's coming down the path next is entry level sports, right? So maybe you're paying $100 here, $100 there for sports. And then if they're involved in hockey or lacrosse or football, there's some pretty serious equipment costs, right? That's going to cost a little bit more.
And then you're hoping your coach is smart enough to have done these things that we've just talked about today too.
Right, exactly.
Is your coach fiscally responsible? That's the next short time.
Exactly, right? I mean, well, you're dependent on that coach socializing your children to a degree as well, right? Now we're getting into a whole nother space here, but
yeah,
it's a real thing. I mean, the finances, the amount of stress that a poor financial situation can cause on an individual or a marriage is tremendous. And I mean, I see it on a daily basis. Again, we have every bit of 60 meetings a month with our clients and prospective clients. And some of the things that we hear confidentially aren't so colorful. It's not always butterflies and rainbows. But the conversations that are the most fun are the people that have their financial house in order and they know exactly what their accounts are doing. And we've built the plan together, right? So I would say my one piece of advice is if you're not saving, start saving anywhere. Put it in the budget because it's easier to start doing it now than later.
Want to bring up one thing Jared Yehlen has in common here with the two-time NCAA champion. His name is Chris Pendleton. He is the second person to ever be interviewed in this studio. Chris Pendleton was the first. Now Jarrett Yehlen, a soccer player from Pocosin, Virginia, gets the number 2 behind Chris Pendleton, NCAA champion from Oklahoma State. Jarrett, appreciate the information, and I think it's been extremely beneficial for those listening. And again, any questions, check his email out one more time.
Jarrett Yehlen, JarrettYehlen@NM as in NorthwesternMutual.com. Jason, it's been awesome, man. This is my pleasure to be a part of this. Thank you.
Next time you come by, we'll actually have to not talk about work.
Yes, let's do that.
What's interesting about that interview is at one point in the show, I alluded to the next guest on the program, which would be Lindsay Beasley, the wife of Frank Beasley, the head coach at George Mason. Now, for my friends listening back in Pocosin, and when you hear the name Frank Beasley, no, not the same Frank Beasley that, one, Jarrett was high school soccer teammates with, and two, the one that we went to high school with. So spelled differently. Yeah, we talked about it after we got done recording. It's like, wait a minute, Frank Beasley. Yeah, not that Frank Beasley, different Frank Beasley. The wrestling people know the Frank Beasley I'm talking about, the head coach at George Mason. No, Pocosin people, I don't think Frank from Pocosin went and got a wrestling career after high school and became a head wrestling coach and moved to Illinois and had a whole secret life. I don't know. Maybe he spelled his name differently. Maybe it's his own little side hustle. So my Bull Island natives that were listening to this and confused by the Frank Beasley reference, that's what I'm referring to. I had to clear that up. Anyway, it has been a big month of shows here on the Matt Talk Podcast Network. You got a lot of content from the NWCA convention, a lot of dynamic guests, and we are moving into the World Championships as they approach. I'll be leaving for Trnava, Slovakia on September the 13th. In between now and then, we'll have Lindsay Beasley talking. We'll have Drew Manning. He is the guy from Fit to Fat to Fit. He wrestled up in Northern Virginia in high school and wrestled at Southern Virginia when they were an NCAA team. We'll be talking about fitness and things with him later on in the month. And I'm also working on building out the interviews with all our world teamers. And this is throughout the course of the network, not just here on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. So if you go to MadTalkOnline.com, and at the top of the page, you'll see this thing that says special sections on the top menu. You can mouse over, and you'll see 2018 U.S. World Team Podcasts. What you will see there is links to and players of certain podcasts that involve our world teamers. I'm going to add Sam Hazwinkle, who is on the mat. He will also be on the mat. We'll also have Ellis Coleman soon. 5 Point Move has also had interviews with Ellis Coleman and Adam Kuhn. The Pack Mentality Pop-Ins podcast has Nick Wisdowski on the mats. Also had Nashawn Garrett. I'm going to start moving through these before October 20th. So we got a lot of them that we're going to put out. So the next month and a half of shows on the Mad Talk Podcast Network, a lot of heavy emphasis on the U.S. Senior World Team. Of course, I'm going to be at the Junior World Championships, so I'll be talking to some of our Americans that are there in special short-time features. So a lot of content is going to be coming through. Speaking of that content, let you know that if you like what you hear here on the Matt Talk Podcast Network, you can become a patron of this program by going to MadTalkOnline.com/join the team. Small monthly contributions. You can get some cool stuff. We've got our new shirts coming down the pipe from Cliff Fretwell and the crew at Compound at CMPTeamwear.com. We got the draft classes in. I'm waiting to get everything together and send them out again. So this year, the shirts, we're going to go with a straight black shirt. Got some Vegas gold and then some silver. So gold and silver, y'all. I don't know. It's the only tournament I ever wrestled that I got a medal in. I actually got a silver, so I'm sticking with that. So that's what we're going with. Compound. So those new shirts will be coming out. If you want to see you've seen some Matt Talk shirts around. If you want one, the only way to get them is be really, really nice to me or become a patron, MadTalkOnline.com/join the team. That'll take you to our Patreon page, and that is how Short Time is financially supported. So it's, we've got shows on the network that are clients like Virginia Tech, Old Dominion, things of that nature. They are clients, but this show is listener supported. So Cliff Fretwell does a great job with the gear sponsorship, but financially, I can't pay a guy in a T-shirt to get a new computer or to build a new studio or to expand the reach of shows and get equipment. So if you like what you hear, again, you contribute to this network, you get some cool stuff: stickers, draft class, shirts, hats. I got the beanies now. I'm moved away from the baseball caps, and I'm going to beanies because it's a winter sport for the most part in this country, and that's the type of stuff you're going to get. So I'd like to thank everybody who has become a patron. As a matter of fact, we got a new patron that I have not mentioned Aaron Sweezy, we mentioned. He was a patron. We got that. Let's see. Where are our new patrons? I'm going to go to my email, and I'm going to go to Patreon and see who recently has hooked it up. Glenn Gormley. Yeah. William and Mary. Greenleaf, man. That guy had like one of the best pubs and sandwich shops and beer places in all of Williamsburg, Virginia. And Glenn Gormley is a new Patreon subscriber. Thanks, Glenn. Proud of Williamsburg. Although I think he lives in Pennsylvania now. But also things that you get. Here's one thing that Glenn liked is part of that $10 a month thing is you get access to the database, the sandbox that I use. Basically, it is all my research that I've been building for the National Hall of Fame and building stats. Like I've got all the All-Americans and things of that nature. You get access to that if you are at the $10 a month level. So little note for you stat nerds out there. All sorts of stuff like there. Again, that pretty much wraps up this episode. My kids, oh my goodness, I'm feeling old, man. My 6-year-old is in first grade. We put her on the bus. My 2-year-old is in Montessori school, and that's right around the block. So it's like I've got a house here that's empty. I don't know what to do with myself. I'm going to end up doing more shows. Coburn's Delivers has already been here. I'm going to sit here. I can maybe get on the treadmill, which I probably won't do anyway. But, yeah, life happens. Crazy. Wrestling season's just around the corner. California Community College wrestling season begins here shortly, too. We're going to talk a little bit about that on future episodes here of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Again, if you have not rated or reviewed this show, go to Apple Podcasts, formerly known as iTunes. Do the rating and review thing. You can also do that on Stitcher. Also, check out the vast library of shows at the Mad Talk Podcast Network, madtalkonline.com. Different strokes for different folks, everything you need. Putting out thousands. I think my last count, I put over 1,000. I'm almost at 1,100 podcasts. Lifetime. Yeah, crazy. 10-year anniversary of my podcast. My podcast anniversary also coming up here in about 2 months. That's all I got for you now. I'd like to thank you. Man, I haven't said that in a while. So let's try this again. Say it with me now. I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me because you've always got time for Short Time. The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Clothing. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. First time listening? Well, you can change that by going to MadTalkOnline.com/GetShortTime to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or listen on your favorite podcatcher at MadTalkOnline.com/listen.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MadTalkOnline.com.